I'm Nick LeBlanc, and I'm going to tell you guys about two objects that describe describe my relationship to New Bedford. Unfortunately, neither one of these objects exist in the area anymore. One was sold by whale for a few $1,000s up to Boston, and the other one was knocked down and turned into Riverside Park. The first object is a Paul Revere sign that was on Route 195 that could be seen when coming east on Route 195 into New Bedford. And the other is, I believe it was the former Pierce Mill that was on Belleville Avenue that in the 80s or 90s had a fire and turned it into a giant dilapidated mill on the river. And both these objects to me, which are no longer there, were emblematic of my childhood. And what they represented to me were a return to the city from two different directions. Anytime I was coming back to New Bedford, home from the west, I would see the Paul Revere sign. At one point, early on in my childhood, the legs would still move. After a while that stopped, and eventually, I forget what year it was taken down, then sold by whale. But even as a child, before I knew highway numbers or directions, I knew the sign. And when I saw that sign, it changed the way that I felt, because I knew that 2 or 3 exits later, I would be turning off and getting back home. The other object, similarly, the old Pierce Mill that had burned down. Not all the way though, it had burned down just enough where the roof had sunken in and some windows were broken, and it was a giant, mysterious, decaying building. I remember knowing that it was a mill because I had asked, what is that giant haunted place? But I didn't know what a mill was. I knew that I had some relatives who worked in mills, my aunts and whatnot, but it was still sort of a mystery at that time what they did in those places. But to me, I would see that anytime I was coming back from the east, when I was coming back from Fairhaven, we would turn onto Belleville Ave and work our way all the way to Clifford Street and turn up Clifford Street and go home. But when I saw that building, even when I didn't know where I was, I could see it in the distance because it was a giant, lumbering, shadowy figure. I knew that I was home. And so when I think about my relationship to New Bedford, what it means to me is home. I left here to go to college and I came back. And when I came back, after a few years, I ended up working for the city. I'm a public school teacher, and so I bought property in the city now, and I've planted myself, because to me, New Bedford is home. And what home is something that's, to me, something that's internal. It's not something necessarily that's physical. It's something that I feel. When I was elsewhere at college or traveling around or doing anything, I could tap into New Bedford, especially considering my closest friends, the people who I travel with or live with elsewhere, are from this area too. My closest friends, actually, ironically, 2 of which who live quite literally next door to me, we've been friends since 4th grade. And so when we're around each other, even if we were on the West Coast, we could tap into that same sense of home and place of New Bedford. So when people speak about New Bedford, they like to talk about the history, the abolition, the whaling, and the culture. But for me, being a lower class kid who grew up in some apartments in the North End, it was more than that. It's sort of an abstract feeling, some mix of comfort, mystery, and danger. Because giant, scary buildings feel dangerous, and signs on the highway with Paul Revere, with no obvious historical connection to the area, breed some kind of mystery in the young mind. And then you hear stories about the city that people have told forever, local folklore about places like Brookline Park or anything. It all blends into some kind of a abstract emotion. And so for me, when thinking about what objects connect me to New Bedford, ironically, it's two that aren't there anymore, but they'll always be with me, similar to how when I go elsewhere, this strange place has always been with me as well.